Melissa, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I want to give full attention to what's going on behind you, which is the publication of your book, your debut book, I believe, Fight
Yes,
Faithfully,
yep.
all about what you've gone through with endometriosis and infertility. What brought you to wanting to share your experiences with other people?
Yeah, so a part of my journey sort of consisted of not really having anyone to talk to or relate to. When I was diagnosed when I was 22 years old, I never heard of the word endometriosis. My endometriosis story turned into an infertility battle, and it was just a very lonely, isolating time of my life. And so I felt like if I could write out sort of from beginning to end of my journey, that like if anybody could read it, if I could help one person, that was sort of the mindset that I went with as I kept writing. Just help one person, because I felt like I could have used that one person during my times.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, we've gone or come a long way, I think, in terms of awareness and talking about endometriosis, but I still keep hearing people that are newly diagnosed that still feel alone and don't know anyone in their family or in their friend group that has the disease. So it's very isolating, and they're looking to books like yours or community chat groups that are online in order to feel some sense of common ground and community. So you were diagnosed at 22, which when I hear that, it usually means there was years of suffering prior. What were some of the symptoms for you that led you to your diagnosis?
Yeah, so after I did some research post being diagnosed, I learned that a lot of people experience the painful periods, and that was like one thing that really led them to go see a doctor. That wasn't really the case for me. Mine was always just really low down back pain, abdominal pain, that kind of doubled over, can't really move sort of a feeling. That was like the major pain that I was experiencing. And in college, my senior year, I actually became an egg donor at an infertility clinic, because I was a struggling college student and I looked up a way, sort of to make money. It sounds selfish, at the beginning of it. But then when I walked into the clinic and I saw all these couples that were sitting there, women, just sitting there reading in the waiting room, it was very eye-opening to me that this is a big issue, and that a lot of people can't start their families because of different infertility battles. And so I really put my heart like into wanting to help a person bring a child into the world. So I became an egg donor. And at the egg retrieval, when I woke up from the anesthesia, the doctor essentially accused me of not taking any of the medicine to grow any of my eggs, because they couldn't retrieve any. And I had bruises to prove it. I took the medicine, and there was no way other than just wanting her to believe me that I could prove my point, right? And so she kind of went from the accusation side to, okay, maybe there's actually something wrong with her. So she helped me and suggested doing an exploratory surgery. And what was supposed to be 45 minutes turned into like almost 5 hours, and was diagnosed at that point with stage 4 endometriosis. So yeah, that's the long answer to yes. Wow. There was a lot of years of doctors not believing me, a lot of pain, and then sort of that diagnosis there.
And then when you found out that you had endometriosis, were they able to tell you that you were infertile at that time, or suspect that you were infertile?
They didn't give me a hard diagnosis. First I needed them to explain to me what endometriosis was, because it was so foreign to me. And then in those conversations, there was a lot of discussion among, in a few years from now, if you're trying to start a family, just know that this could be the reason behind any infertility that you might be experiencing.
That's really a phenomenal story, in the sense of, if you didn't want to become an egg donor, you probably wouldn't have gotten your endo diagnosis for several years later, which could have even have led to you being, being sterile. And we'll talk more about that. But for you, so after that diagnosis, after that 5-hour exploratory surgery that determined you had the disease, at what point between then and to when you wanted to start a family was it clear to you that endo had impacted your fertility?
Yeah. So I was 22 when I was diagnosed, and then I got married when I was 26. And so there was 4 years in between there, to where in those 4 years I had a couple other surgeries. The pain really never resolved. I ended up having a uterine uplift done, where actually they like literally ripped out the uterus and then tilted it back up and then attached it to like ligaments. And so just lots of scar tissue going on. In that surgery, actually the doctor mistied one of the knots of the, like, with the uterus to the muscle. And it was to the point where if I sneezed, it literally felt like I was being stabbed on the right side of my stomach. So then I had to have a surgery to fix that. So there was a lot of surgeries intentionally to clear out my lesions, and then a few surgeries that sort of coincided with my issues with my uterus and endometriosis and whatnot, but just a lot of scar tissue. And so every time I would come out from the surgery, or even prior to going in, the discussions with the doctors was always, okay, we can go in, but just so you know, more scar tissue could lead to more infertility issues. But I was kind of in the mindset of just get me out of the pain now, and I'll deal with possible infertility in the future. So when I was 26, we started trying, and it was a full year with nothing happening. And so then I went on Clomid for a year, and then that was a whole other year of nothing happening. And so it was probably that halfway mark on the Clomid where I was like, we're going to end up needing more help than just the Clomid. Like, this is not going anywhere. And I sort of coped with that reality of this is what they meant with the infertility being an issue because of my endometriosis.
And also, I realize you're not a doctor, but I've never heard of a uterine uplift. What is the point of that surgery?
My uterus was very tilted and like sort of on an angle where it would be hard to get pregnant. And so in some of the scans that I had done, the doctor suggested, let's do another lesion sort of clean out situation. And when we're doing that, I will then tilt your uterus the proper way so that in planning to have children in a few years, hopefully this would help. So the mindset behind it was to really set me up for success come trying to have children. Had they have just left it alone, there's a few doctors that I saw afterwards that said it would have been fine. That wouldn't have been an issue. But you kind of put your hands in doctors and you just sort of are trusting whatever path they are kind of bringing you on.
And through you going through like the infertility procedures and surgeries, how was your endo? Were you in pain?
Yes. Yeah. So it was one of those things where post-laparoscopic, you go through the healing process of the surgery itself, and then maybe a little bit of relief, few weeks, maybe even a few months where you're like very hopeful because you're like, wow, like feeling great. You can start working out again post-surgery, and you're just kind of on this adrenaline high almost. And then it sort of kept turning the corner back to, just pains and frustration and just everything. So it's like sort of this never ending spiral.
And also, like with stage 4 endo, we keep hearing from doctors now, the best way to handle endo is early intervention before it becomes deep infiltrating endo or extra pelvic endo. But once you're at a stage 4, and many people I've talked to with stage 4 endo have said, okay, but what about us?
Yeah.
We're already in this world of hurt, right, figuratively and literally, and there's no easy way out of it. And it is chronic and it is inflammatory. And here your body is going through these infertility processes or fertility procedures. that puts stress on the body, that causes more inflammation. It's like counterintuitive to what everything endo needs in order to be calmed. And yet once you go through in vitro in itself is like fueling the body with all different hormone levels, which in turn, if you are fortunate enough to become pregnant, somehow it's like after the pregnancy and the endo can be quelled at that time for most people, I would say, again, not a doctor, it can come back raging just because of the fertility treatments.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So sort of like fast forward through everything. Just this past October, I actually ended up having a full hysterectomy done because when I had my daughter, so another spoiler alert, I was sort of told like, okay, you got pregnant. Let's go through, the pregnancy, see how this helps with your endometriosis. And like all of 2021 was just, it was brutal for me. So nothing was really helping. And yeah, I agree. Like once you're already at that stage 4 situation, you're like, okay, like what are we going to do to take any of this pain away? Because I had a lot of doctors from age 12 to 22 that, you can't see it on the scans. None of them, even the word endometriosis was never even brought up by a doctor. So it wasn't even like, well, it could be a possibility, but let's try X, Y, and Z. It wasn't even in the conversation. So yes, had maybe a doctor have believed me around age 16, 17, 18, what have you, we could have maybe eliminated that stage 4 advancement already.
Right. And going back to, and I'm sorry to hear that you've had to go through another surgery and such a definitive one. And these things are just psychologically taxing, very, very hard. So when you figured out that you needed to do in vitro, like how hard was that for you to deal? I mean, here you are, like surgery after surgery. Like, what was your mindset at this point?
Yeah, I very defeated, very much like I felt like even though my doctors trusted this next step in the process, I felt like it was just I was set up for more failure, more heartache, lots of struggling, just nothing was coming easy. It took years to try and get a doctor to believe my pain. Then it was years of trying to eliminate this pain with no success. And then it was, now at this point when IVF was starting, was a good 2 years of just like very little hope that was being put in front of me. So
and again,
yeah,
this
yeah,
for your body,
yeah.
physiologically, your body is just,
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
IVF is I know there's a population of people obviously that cannot afford it. And that speaks to the healthcare system in the United States alone and how it's considered like a luxury to do IVF. And it should not be that way because everyone should have the right to choose how they would like to fulfill their families, their lifestyles. But it is incredibly hard on the psyche, but also on the body, especially someone who has a pre-existing medical condition like endometriosis.
Mhm.
So I also read that you endured another procedure after you had your child, right? That you suffered a chemical pregnancy and
Yes.
miscarriage. Um, so for you, for people going through this process that could be feeling defeated, alone, isolated, what advice do you have for them as someone who is just, I want to say you really heroically handled it,
Yeah,
but
thank you.
it's, yeah, but it leaves its
Yeah.
own battle wounds.
Yeah, I think what I really learned is that nobody knows my body more than I know my body. And I think finding the right doctor who is not in it for the paycheck or just comes in and quickly examines you, leaves the room right away. I've seen so many different types of doctors that bedside manner, I think, speaks volumes to how they will take care of you and really be invested in your treatment. And so I've left doctors, I've gone for an appointment and I've walked out and I've said, I'm never going back to them, on to the next one. Like, they could be the smartest person in their field and a whole bunch of doctors might recommend them. But if I don't feel that emotional connection to the doctor I'm literally putting my life like in their hands, or my family's life in their hands, it's huge. And if on paper they have a ton of credentials to their names and heads of hospitals or what have you, but they don't have that bedside manner, it's huge for me. And so the advice that I would give is just understand that you really know your body better than anyone else. You know your pains and you can describe them to people, but nobody feels them except for you. And so I think just really stay true to that part of it, and know that there are doctors out there that will treat you like you want to be treated and just care for you in that sense of compassion that you need. And if that's something that's important to you, it's something that's important to me. And so I think just realizing that you're in control. Like, if you don't like what a doctor is doing to you or the path that you're going down, there's nobody making you stay with that doctor. You can go out and find a different doctor. So I think just really,
yeah, no, that's excellent advice, because I do feel like I've been in appointments where I felt like I was a defense attorney on my own symptoms. And you're like, why would a doctor question you so much to the point where, I've been shaking and I feel, and I question my own like logic sometimes. I'm like, well, could this be psychosomatic? No, because I already had, at this point, like 2 surgeries and extra pelvic endo. And why am I being made to feel like somehow, because I had the 2 surgeries prior at the time, that I must have some sort of PTSD from the surgeries and therefore that's why I have pain? No, it's chronic. It comes back for some people, especially at a stage 4 level. So yeah, I think that's really good to go into an appointment and realize that if you are feeling like you are lawyering your case, get out of there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Who believes you and who's going to treat, like you said, with that compassion, because we had a guest last week and she put things in a way that I hadn't heard it before. And I think it can resonate with a lot of people, perhaps you too. But she said, if you are going to see a specialist, if you are going to see a surgeon and you are taking time out of your day, school, work, you're traveling, you're paying, you've done all of this research to go see this specialist, you already are at your most weak and vulnerable in your life. And you were looking to have this doctor hear you, believe you, help you. And so many times, these high expectations are not met.
Right.
And you leave there more defeated, more misunderstood, and helpless. So I just hope that doctors hear these words from the community, the endo community specifically.
Yes.
Because it should not take an average of 7 to 10 years for someone to be diagnosed. Because again, it's like, then here we are in our 30s, in our 20s, in our 40s, having to have very hard decisions about family planning, dealing with organs being taken away, like our tubes, our ovaries, our uteruses, our kidneys even can fail. I mean, there's just so much, appendix. I mean, like, I could write a laundry list of the organs I don't have because of endo. And that's crazy. I'm laughing because the absurdity of it and the pain of it is too hard to actually say with a straight face for me.
A part of my book actually talks about how pre-diagnosis, I woke up one day with incredible pain and ended up going to the hospital, and they were like, you need your appendix taken out immediately. Like, it's about to rupture. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't prepared for this. Okay, sounds good. And then they take out my appendix. And afterwards I'm like, what caused that? And they're like, it could have been from some seeds that you were eating. And they're like, just eliminate seeds from your diet. And I'm like, okay, so I guess all my pain, like, and that was when I was,
were you even, I mean, but honestly, like, were you eating seeds that to that
no,
kind of like
I mean, like,
copious amount?
No, so I joke about that in my book that like, okay, like I guess I won't have an everything bagel anymore, like I guess that's pretty much the extent of the amount of seeds I would consume.
Right.
But yeah, that was when I was 19. So I'm thinking as a 19-year-old, oh, from when I was 12 to 19, maybe my appendix was just, giving me problems. Now I'm
Right.
fixed. And then, 2 weeks post-surgery, all the pain is still there. And I'm like, okay, so
Well, and can we also bring up the appendix and endo? Because I had one surgery in 2016. That was my first excision surgery. First time I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed in February 2016, had the surgery in March, shortly after the diagnosis. And then in, I believe it was May 2017, my symptoms came rip-roaring back, but they were slightly different this time. I was getting low-grade fevers, but like sweating, like so clammy, and electric shock pain down my side, and like feeling as though I had a virus, like very ill. And it got so bad that I thought I was going to pass out. And at the time, my boyfriend at the time looked at me and was like, we have to go to the hospital. Like, you are really sick. So we go there, they do all these tests, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, do you think it could be your appendix? And I'm like, I don't know. I have endo. I don't know. So they're like, rushed me into surgery. They go in there, and I was having appendicitis from all the endo adhesions or lesions that were in or around the appendix. But no blood test, even though I had multiple blood tests prior to that, nothing would show endo or the white blood cell count being high, because I didn't have actual like appendicitis. It was my appendix that was about to rupture from the endo. And then they found a slew of other things. Point being, it's like, again, extra pelvic endo that can take your organs and could cause somebody to go into septic shock. Like,
one of the first things after I came out of the first exploratory surgery, that one that was like 5 hours long, and she sat afterwards and talked with me. She was like, just so you know, that appendicitis that you had years ago, I would wager a guess to say that it wasn't from anything food related, and she found lesions in that same area. And so, but the emergency room doctors, like I've talked to a few of them, unrelated to that scenario. I've had my fair share of time in the emergency rooms, and they don't even know really what endometriosis is. So the doctors, they're just not educated with endometriosis enough to be able to correlate those two.
And this is why I want to have these discussions here. And this is why your book is so valuable, because I'm hoping that, okay, maybe they haven't upgraded in medical school about endometriosis. Maybe there hasn't been enough education there. But somewhere, hopefully, some of these doctors are able to watch it, read it, get it, so that the next time someone comes in to their ER, they can say, oh, actually, I have a just an off the beaten path story, but I have a friend who's an ER doctor in California, and he has been watching some of our episodes, and he was not really familiar with endometriosis at all, but he had this woman that kept coming in with abdominal pain, and some of his colleagues were thinking that she was a drug user. Because she would come in and say, I'm in so much pain, I'm in so much pain. And they thought that was a morphine grab. And it wasn't. And she had a lower socioeconomic background. She didn't have medical insurance. And they kept kind of just dismissing her and sending her out. And he said, can I please, examine her? Can I ask her? And he said, when he was asking her symptoms, he said they were endometriosis symptoms. And I wouldn't have had a clue about that. I probably would have just been like, oh, she's got like IBS or something.
Sure.
He said, and we were able to connect her with a gynecologist at the hospital, and sure enough, got her into surgery, and she does have endo. And he said, but I would have never known that. And he goes, and here I've gone through medical school, I'm a practicing physician. And he said, and I had to learn it by watching an endo episode.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, that's amazing that you're doing something like this with this type of a platform to be able to get the word out. So I'm very grateful to be a part of these conversations. I do have some hope since going through IVF treatment that we are on a path to broaden these conversations and broaden the education. And I think that comes from when I was going through IVF, a lot of my parents, friends of my parents, like their generation, they didn't even really know what IVF was. So you're talking like, let's just say 40 to 50 years ago, like this wasn't a thing, or it was so new or just not even talked about. And I think that now that I've gone through it, I'm relating that to endometriosis in the sense of, 30, 40 years ago, or even now, nobody really is still talking about it on this high end level where the general population would know what we're talking about. If you say that somebody has cancer, people can understand what that means.
Right.
Endometriosis isn't on that same topic level, but I think we are trending. I have hope that we're trending in the direction to that being the ability to have those conversations and it not be so foreign.
Yeah. And also to have a sympathetic, and not that we want sympathy, I think it's more just an understanding. That it isn't an excuse, that it isn't in our heads, that there's not something psychologically wrong with us because we look quote unquote fine. Just basic understanding of just how pervasive and insidious and debilitating. And also, like I keep saying, broaden the definition where it isn't a disease that's only affiliated with the reproductive organs, because as we mentioned, it can really cause the overall system to crash. I appreciate you and your book, and I'm hoping that more and more people will follow you and read it, because I know for me this would suck to just have this information and go through it and feel like, so I was just kind of handed a crappy card. But to think that in some way being handed a crappy card means that you can help somebody else, like you said, just that one person, can make a really big difference. Because endo, 1 in 10 people have it that are born with the uterus. It's a disease that's really still quite a mystery to the medical community, and we need to put some pressure on it to change. So thank you for being someone who's doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And it definitely has opened my eyes to my journey isn't solely just the things that I've gone through aren't just to me. Like, I think that the way that you were mentioning IBS being, a possible diagnosis, like this, it all has to do with things that I've experienced. So there's definitely people out there that I know are sitting there struggling, thinking nobody knows my pain, nobody understands this journey I've gone through. But I think that the message is that there are some people out there that get it, and let's just keep talking about it more and more, and not make it an uncomfortable conversation. And I think more people will learn that there's people that can come alongside of them and really understand. And so I think, we're doing a great thing by having the talks now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.